Have you ever wondered what it takes for a good person, someone kind, compassionate, and ethical, to commit acts of cruelty or even become a monster? Imagine someone you admire, someone you trust, transforming into someone you barely recognize. What if I told you that this isn't just a rare anomaly, but a pattern seen across history and human behavior today? We are delving into one of the most provocative and unsettling questions about human nature. Why do good people sometimes do bad things? By the end of this video, you'll uncover the shocking mechanisms that push ordinary individuals into darkness. More importantly, we will uncover how to recognize and resist these forces, with the last insight being the most critical and empowering of them all. This journey takes us deep into the psychological experiments, historical events, and philosophical reflections that expose the thin lines separating good from evil. This is not just a story of others. It's a mirror that forces us to look inward and ask, what would I do in their place? Could I be swayed by these forces? Stay with me, because what you'll discover today could fundamentally change the way you see the world and yourself. The Lucifer effect is a concept popularized by the psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who conducted the infamous Stanford Prison Experiment. What he revealed was profoundly unsettling. The environment we are placed in, the roles we adopt, and the authority we obey can twist even the most virtuous individuals into perpetrators of harm. Think about it. History is filled with examples of ordinary people who committed extraordinary atrocities. The guards in Nazi concentration camps, the soldiers who carried out ethnic cleansing, or even the bystanders who stood silent as horrors unfolded. All of these individuals were not born evil. They were in many cases regular people swept up in circumstances that unleash the darkest parts of human nature. Why does this happen? The answer lies in a combination of psychological and social forces that shape behavior. First, there is the power of authority. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the 1960s showed that people would go to extreme lengths, even inflicting pain on others, when instructed by an authority figure. In his study, participants were asked to deliver electric shocks to another person who was actually an actor pretending to feel pain. Shockingly, most participants continued administering shocks even when they believed they were causing severe harm, simply because they were told to do so. Now, think about your own life. How often do we follow instructions without questioning them, whether it's from a boss, a leader, or even societal norms? What would you do if someone in a position of power asked you to compromise your morals for the greater good? Another critical factor is the concept of dehumanization. When we strip others of their humanity, labeling them as the enemy, subhuman, or less than it, becomes easier to justify acts of cruelty. This is a tactic used time and again in propaganda war and even everyday conflicts. It's easier to harm someone when you no longer see them as a person. Consider the language we use today in social and political discourse. How often do we see groups of people reduced to labels or stereotypes? Reflect on how this diminishes our empathy and connection, creating an us versus them mentality. But dehumanization is only part of the puzzle. Social roles in group dynamics also play a significant role. Zimbardo, Stanford Prison Experiment, vividly demonstrated this. College students were randomly assigned to be either guards or prisoners in a simulated prison environment. Within days, the guards began to exhibit abusive behavior, and the prisoners showed signs of extreme stress and submission. What was shocking was how quickly the participants lost sight of their individuality and conformed to the roles they were given. This raises a critical question. How much of our identity is shaped by the role society imposes on us? Are we truly free to act as individuals? Or are we subconsciously playing parts dictated by the systems around us? These forces, authority, dehumanization, and group dynamics, are not theoretical. They are active in our daily lives, influencing the way we think, act, and perceive others. We see them in workplaces, schools, social media, and even within families. Recognizing these forces is the first step in resisting them, but what about the tipping point, the exact moment when a good person crosses the line? That moment is often subtle. It begins with small compromises, a decision to stay silent when witnessing injustice, an agreement to follow along just this once over time. These small choices accumulate, creating a slippery slope that can lead to profound moral failure. Pause for a moment and think, have you ever made a choice that went against your values because it felt easier or safer? What were the consequences as we move forward? We'll explore how to recognize these moments before they spiral out of control. More importantly, we'll uncover how to foster resilience against these psychological forces. But first, let's confront an even deeper question. Are some people immune to the Lucifer effect? Or is it a danger we all face? Stay tuned, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about yourself and human nature. Let's now confront the question that lingers in the minds of many. Are some people truly immune to the Lucifer effect? The answer, as uncomfortable as it may be, is that none of us are entirely immune. Psychologists have long debated the role of personality in resisting corruption and moral collapse. While certain traits such as strong empathy, self-awareness, and moral courage may act as protective factors, the truth is that under the right or perhaps the wrong circumstances, anyone can fall prey to these forces. Think of it this way: we all carry within us the capacity for both great good and unspeakable harm. This duality is a recurring theme in literature, religion, and philosophy. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, described this as the shadow aspect of our psyche, the darker, often repressed parts of ourselves that we are reluctant to acknowledge. Jung believed that to fully understand ourselves, we must confront this shadow and integrate it into our conscious awareness. Have you ever felt a surge of anger or envy, so intense that it surprised even you? Have you ever said or done something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted deeply? These are glimpses of the shadow at work left unchecked. This shadow can grow and manifest in ways that align with the Lucifer effect. But here's the hopeful part. Awareness is our greatest defense. By understanding the psychological mechanisms that lead to moral collapse, we gain the power to resist them. So let's delve deeper into how these forces operate in the real world and how we can counteract them. One of the most insidious mechanisms is something psychologists call moral disengagement. This concept, introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura, explains how individuals rationalize harmful behavior to avoid feeling guilt or remorse. For example, someone might convince themselves that everyone else is doing it, or that the ends justify the means. These rationalizations create a psychological distance between the individual and their actions, making it easier to justify wrongdoing. Consider how this plays out in everyday scenarios. A student might cheat on an exam, telling themselves it's just a one-time thing. A manager might treat employees unfairly, believing it's necessary to meet company goals. In these moments, moral disengagement allows people to act in ways that contradict their values. The antidote to this is what some psychologists refer to as moral vigilance. This involves actively questioning our actions and their consequences, even when it's uncomfortable. I love you. Am I justifying something that deep down I know is wrong? Another powerful tool is the cultivation of empathy. Empathy acts as a counterbalance to dehumanization. When we truly see others as complex feeling individuals, people with hopes, fears, and dreams, it becomes much harder to harm them. This is why storytelling, art, and genuine human connection are so vital. They remind us of our shared humanity and break down the barriers that divide us. But what about the societal level? How do we address the larger systems and structures that perpetuate harm and enable the Lucifer effect on a grand scale? This is where the role of leadership and collective responsibility becomes crucial. History has shown us that charismatic leaders can either uplift or corrupt entire societies. Adolf Hitler, for example, manipulated fear and prejudice to justify atrocities. On the other hand, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to inspire positive change and resistance against injustice. This brings us to a pivotal question. What kind of leader do we choose to follow, and what kind of influence do we exert on others, even if we're not in positions of traditional authority? We all have influence within our families, communities, and workplaces. The question is whether we use that influence to promote compassion and fairness, or to perpetuate harm and division. Reflect for a moment on your own life. Who are the people you look up to? What values do they embody? And equally important, what kind of example are you setting for those who look up to you? As we examine these forces, authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and leadership, it's clear that the battle between good and evil is not just external, it's an internal struggle that each of us faces daily. But here's the empowering truth. Just as circumstances can lead people astray, they can also guide us toward extraordinary acts of kindness, courage, and integrity. The same mechanisms that create monsters can also create heroes. So how do we ensure we stay on the path of good? How do we cultivate the strength to resist the pull of the Lucifer effect when it arises? The answers lie ahead. In the next section, we'll uncover practical strategies for recognizing and resisting the forces that lead to moral failure. These strategies have been tested by psychologists, spiritual leaders, and ordinary individuals who have faced extraordinary challenges. And remember, the final insight we'll explore is the most transformative of all, a realization that could change not only the way you see others, but also how you see yourself. To resist the forces that can lead us astray, we must first understand that awareness alone is not enough. While recognizing the physiological mechanisms of the Lucifer effect is a crucial step, we need actionable strategies to counteract their influence. Let's explore these strategies, beginning with the concept of moral courage. Moral courage is the ability to act ethically and stand up for what is right, even in the face of fear, opposition, or personal loss. It's what drives someone to speak out against injustice, to protect the vulnerable, or to admit a mistake when it would be easier to stay silent. But moral courage is not something we are born with, it's something we cultivate through deliberate practice and reflection. Think of historical figures like Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat on a bus, sparking a civil rights movement, or consider whistleblowers who expose corruption and wrongdoing, often at great personal cost. These individuals were not immune to fear, but they chose to act despite it. So how can we develop moral courage in our own lives? Start by identifying your core values, the principles that matter most to you. These might include honesty, compassion, fairness, or accountability. Reflect on times when you face the moral dilemma. Did you act in alignment with these values, or did you compromise them? One practical exercise is to imagine yourself in challenging scenarios. What would you do if you witnessed bullying at work? How would you respond if pressured to follow an unethical directive? By visualizing these situations and rehearsing your response, you strengthen your ability to act decisively when the moment arises. Another essential strategy is to build strong social connections with people who share your values. Surrounding yourself with supportive and principled individuals can act as a buffer against negative influences. These relationships provide a sense of accountability and encouragement, making it easier to resist the pressures of conformity and authority. But what about when we're confronted with systems or environments that seem designed to erode our morals? This is where the concept of situational awareness becomes vital. Situational awareness involves recognizing the subtle cues and dynamics that shape behavior. For example, pay attention to group norms, what is considered acceptable or expected in a given environment. If you notice patterns of exclusion, "I love you," ask yourself, is this truly right, or have I simply accepted it because everyone else has in addition. Consider the role of small actions in creating change. Often we feel powerless in the face of systemic issues, but even small acts of resistance can make a difference. Think of the ripple effect, how one person's decision to act with integrity can inspire others to do the same. For example, in the workplace, speaking up against unethical practices might seem risky, but it can encourage others to voice their concerns as well. Similarly, choosing kindness and understanding in everyday interactions can challenge the culture of dehumanization that often permeates society. Let's also address the critical importance of self-reflection. The philosophers Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Self-reflection allows us to identify our biases, acknowledge our mistakes, and grow from them. It's not about perfection, but about progress, becoming a little better, a little more aware with each passing day. Make it a habit to regularly ask yourself questions like, what motivated my actions today? Did I treat others with respect and empathy? Were there moments when I stayed silent when I should have spoken up? By reflecting on these questions, you train yourself to act with greater intention and integrity. But what about the ultimate question? Can the Lucifer effect ever be completely neutralized? While the answer may depend on individual and societal factors, the key lies in fostering what psychologist Philip Zimbardo calls a heroic imagination. The heroic imagination is the mindset that allows ordinary people to take extraordinary actions in the face of moral challenges. It's the belief that you too can make a difference, that heroism is not reserved for the exceptional, but is accessible to all of us. To cultivate this mindset, start by looking for opportunities to practice small acts of heroism. These might include standing up for someone being treated unfairly, volunteering to help those in need, or simply choosing kindness over indifference in your daily interactions. It's also helpful to study the lives of those who have exemplified heroism, from historical figures to modern-day changemakers. Their stories remind us that courage and compassion are within our reach. At this point, you might be wondering, what is the most powerful insight of all? What final realization can truly transform the way we see ourselves in the world? The answer lies in understanding the profound interconnectedness of humanity. The line between good and evil does not run between groups of people or nations. It runs through every human heart. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn once wrote, the battle line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. This realization is both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that we are all capable of both harm and healing, but it also gives us the agency to choose. Every moment presents a new opportunity to act with integrity, to resist the pull of darkness, and to contribute to a world rooted in compassion and justice. Stay with me, because in the final part, we'll dive even deeper into how these ideas can be applied to your own life. Together, we'll uncover practical steps to not only resist the Lucifer effect, but to become a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. At this point, we've uncovered the psychological mechanisms that can turn good people toward darkness, authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and the influence of group dynamics. We've explored how awareness, moral courage, empathy, and self-reflection serve as defenses against these forces. Now let's focus on what you can do, starting today, to become not just resilient, but a source of light in challenging circumstances. The first step is to recognize your influence. No matter how small or insignificant your role may seem, you have the power to shape the environment around you in every interaction. You contribute to the norms and values that guide others. Are you fostering a culture of kindness, fairness, and accountability, or are you silently allowing harmful behaviors to persist? Consider the story of someone who changed the course of history through seemingly small actions. Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist during the Second World War, while initially motivated by Prophet Schindler, used his resources to save the lives of over 1,000 Jewish people from the Holocaust. His story is a testament to how a single individual, even amidst one of history's darkest chapters, can make a profound difference. You don't need extraordinary circumstances to follow this example. You can start in your own community, workplace, or even within your family. Speak up when you see injustice, offer support to someone who feels isolated, challenge stereotypes and assumptions that divide people. These small acts, when multiplied, have the power to transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. Another vital step is to educate yourself and others. Knowledge is one of the most effective tools against manipulation and moral erosion. Study history, psychology, and philosophy to deepen your understanding of how and why people make the choices they do. Share this knowledge with others, not to preach or lecture, but to spark meaningful conversations that inspire reflection and growth. For example, have you ever considered how much the stories we consume influence our thinking? Films, books, and media often shape our perceptions of good and evil, right and wrong. By seeking out narratives that challenge your assumptions and broaden your perspective, you build a more nuanced and compassionate understanding of the world. Let's also talk about resilience. In the face of pressure, standing up for what is right often comes with risks. Social rejection, professional consequences, or even personal loss. This is why resilience is so crucial. Resilience doesn't mean being fearless. It means continuing to act in accordance with your values, even when fear is present. To build resilience, focus on practices that strengthen your mental and emotional well-being. These might include mindfulness, meditation, journaling, or seeking guidance from mentors and trusted friends. Surround yourself with a community of people who uplift and inspire you. Resilience is not something you will build alone. It thrives in connection with others. But what happens when we fail? Because inevitably there will be moments when fear or pressure gets the better of us, when we act in ways we later regret. This is where the concept of self-forgiveness becomes essential. Self-forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior, but about acknowledging your mistakes, taking responsibility, and committing to do better. It's about understanding that failure is part of the human experience, and that growth often comes from confronting our shortcomings. Reflect for a moment. Is there a time when you fell short of your own values? How did you respond to that failure? Did you learn from it, or did you let it define you? The ability to forgive yourself and others is one of the most powerful tools for breaking free from the cycles of harm perpetuated by the Lucifer effect. It allows you to move forward with clarity and purpose, rather than being weighed down by guilt or resentment. Finally, let's return to the most profound insight of all: the interconnectedness of humanity. When we recognize that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart, we begin to see others and ourselves with greater compassion. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does allow us to approach the world with empathy and a commitment to healing rather than judgment. Think about the ripple effects of your actions. Every choice you make, no matter how small, sends waves out into the world. Will your actions contribute to division and harm, or will they bring people together and inspire hope? Imagine a world where each of us takes responsibility for our own choices, where we resist the forces that dehumanize and divide, and where we strive to create environments that nurture compassion and integrity. This is not an unattainable ideal. It's a reality we can build one decision at a time as we come to the end of this journey. Let me leave you with one final challenge. Reflect on what you've learned today and ask yourself how you can apply it in your own life. How will you recognize and resist the forces that pull you away from your values? How will you contribute to a world where goodness prevails over darkness? The answers to these questions are not easy, but they are worth pursuing, because in the end, the battle between good and evil is not fought on distant battlefields or in abstract theories. It's fought within each of us every single day. So the next time you face a moral choice, remember this: you have the power to choose. You have the power to resist, and you have the power to be a force for good. In a world that desperately needs it, the question is, will you rise to the challenge? Thanks for looking.